Hi, welcome back to the Cultivator podcast, where we update you and share stories from the farm. I'm your host, Daybar, and today I have some home gardener questions for Farmer CJ. Most of these questions are from online. These are some of the top online questions for home gardeners. So let's dive in. You ready?
Oh, I'm ready.
Okay, so the first question that I found online that seems to be asked by many home gardeners is, what are the best vegetables to grow for beginners?
So I want to start out by saying that I think growing your own food, even if you're a beginner, it's the first time you've ever grown anything, is just one of the best things you can do. It's like one of the most revolutionary acts, I think. So I think a good place to start is, assuming you live in New England or wherever you live, if you go to the farmer's market and see what the farmers are selling, that is a good tip of what grows in your region, in your agricultural zone. So if you're seeing a lot of, up here, we have cold winters, so we see a lot of sometimes cold weather things that you can start at the very beginning or grow into, the end of the season. So I think that there are some things to consider as well, which is how much space you have. So while maybe you really love butternut squash, and that probably grows really well where you live, if you live around here, but it takes up a lot of space and it takes a lot of time. So if you have a really limited garden plot, maybe that's not the thing for you. I think also considering how long something takes to grow or how long it produces is also important. Like if you like brassicas, so that's like a family that includes like broccoli and cauliflower and kale and mustard greens and things like that. There are some that they usually grow fairly quickly. Things like if you like bok choy, that's a really good thing to grow because it grows really fast. So you can get like a lot of rounds in. And it's really gratifying because you can you forget to look at it for 3 days and you're like, oh my God. But I will say about brassicas, they are susceptible to pests, sort of a lot of things like to munch them. So I would say a good thing to grow that is both easy and really nutritious are things like kale or collard greens, because one plant will continue to produce. If you harvest it, you leave the growing point intact and you harvest it around the outside, it will produce for the whole season. Wow. But another thing that I think is good for beginners, which again, tailor it to your taste, your personal taste, is zucchini or summer squash, because again, one plant will produce a lot. They grow really quickly. It's really fun. Mm-hmm. You could get some fun varieties. There's a striped one that tastes delicious. But I also think it's a good idea, if you know your neighbors, which I hope you do, but if they also are gardening, I think it's a really good idea to talk to your neighbors and say what do you grow that's easy, or what do you grow that you like, or let's not all grow zucchini because then everyone has an overflowing amount of it.
100%.
You don't know what to do with it.
Okay, so those are so good. Those are such good. Okay, that's a really good answer. First of all, I've made the mistake of just growing things side by side that just, I grew zucchini one time and it overshadowed the plant that I planted too close and then didn't get that. And I just was so excited about putting seeds in the ground. I didn't think about the amount of space the zucchini was going to take up.
Plants get very big. It's a good idea to read your seed packet because it will usually tell you how far apart to plant things.
Yeah.
Because you would think I have all this space. I'm just going to plant it.
Yeah.
Boom, 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 right in a row. But they do get big, and the orientation is important too. So it's best to plant if your rows go sort of east west. So the tallest things should be on the north side because as they grow, they will shade. Yeah, they're not. You don't want them to shade out your other vegetables.
I've also made that mistake as well. But it's funny you mentioned talking to your neighbors, because growing up, my father had a neighbor friend that let him do a little garden in the back of his yard. So he grew a lot of stuff, and his whole plan was to just share with the neighborhood. but there were other people growing things in their backyard too. So one season we had an abundance of tomatoes that my dad grew, and everybody had been growing tomatoes. So no one needed his tomatoes. And now our street's like Tomato City.
Yeah.
And we're like West African. So like we don't really do the pasta thing. So it was really tricky to find ways to utilize tomato. But good idea. Talk to your neighbors as a home gardener, see what's happening.
You're all going to be canning like so many tomatoes. You gotta learn to preserve that harvest.
That's another skill. There you go. So another question that was really high up there is, what is the best way to deal with pests without using chemicals?
Yeah, that's a great question. We do not use any herbicides or pesticides at the farm. So I guess it depends on what sort of pests we're talking about. A lot of insects can be excluded. So if you cover plants, we use something called floating row cover. So it's this like thin sort of white material that is sold in rows. Sometimes you can get it at, garden centers, or we get ours from a supplier. And that can help with excluding pests. So things like flea beetles that just chew little holes, or, larger pests that, until your plant is big enough to really like fend for itself. If you're planting, if you're direct seeding, so things will emerge very, very tiny. Or if you're transplanting like a small transplant, it's good to protect them and cover them. But just make sure, like, if you're using floating row cover, that is something that allows sunlight and water to get through. So if you're covering your plants with something, just make sure you're accounting for those things. So you want the plants to still be able to get water and sunlight. If we're talking about like mammals, I know around here, and we have this problem ourselves, it's just really tricky with the rabbits. The rabbits are insatiable. And there are other things, right? Moles, voles, woodchucks, God forbid. They do a lot of damage.
Not the woodchucks.
There's, some fencing that can happen. We don't have fencing, but things like keeping the grass mowed really short, so they don't have anywhere to hide, is helpful. We recently widened one of our roads, so it would be farther for a member of the rodent family to run from like the hedgerow to the vegetable block, because they're worried about predation. That has helped actually a lot, which is, I thought, was like so encouraging and helpful. So we have put up hawk perches. You can encourage, raptors, predatory birds, owls even. You could have owl boxes if you want to encourage owls to come and hunt in your yard. And I know there are some urban farms that do use like fencing, hardware cloth with a very small squares, but it is sort of like a constant battle because rabbits can dig and there'll be holes and you have to walk the perimeter and make sure everything's okay. So it seems to me like fencing maybe is not worth it. But if that works for you and you have a place in your yard that you could do hardware cloth, yeah.
The hawk perches on the farm are so cool. I love seeing them.
Those were made by Casey's class from Deborah Waring. And they're super. One of them says Bon Appetit.
Oh, really?
Yes. It's very cute.
They're really neat to see. And see, organic practices, right?
Yeah, and I did, like, in the very end of the season in the fall, right at the bottom of one of those perches, saw an owl pellet.
There you go. It's working.
It's working somehow, yeah.
All right. So the next question we've got is, when is the best time to plant tomatoes?
Tomatoes. Everybody loves tomatoes. So I think of tomatoes as like the diva of the veg garden, because they kind of have a lot of problems, and they're a higher maintenance plant. If you want to, they require, or if you want to get the most out of them, They require a certain type of pruning, right? Like a lot of people have heard of like tomato suckers, where it's like between the stem and the branch, they grow like another little plant and they try to become all jungly. That's like their natural instinct. And then you're trying to train them to either have one single leader or double leader.
Okay.
And that allows them to not instead of putting their energy into getting like all bushy and growing my greenery, putting their energy into growing the fruit.
Yep.
But that being said, everyone loves the summer tomato. Tastes amazing.
Sure does.
It really, if you're selling your produce, which I'm assuming you're not if you're a backyard gardener, but if you are, they are, it's a high value crop. That's why a lot of people want to grow them. They do tend to like get a little sometimes diseasey, or you can get, tomato hornworms, those big, juicy, fat green worms.
Yeah.
So, you gotta keep a sharp eye. But our planting date is like the middle of May for tomatoes. And that gives you, tomatoes usually hit the shelves or hit your bowl or plate in July. You can get away with, a little earlier because usually like a good planting date is Memorial Day weekend. It's like very reliable around this area. You can plant your plants out in the yard.
Okay.
We plant a little before that, but that is because we cover them with that floating row cover, which in addition to excluding pests and sort of protecting the plants, it does offer some frost protection, and it keeps them a little warmer than they would be otherwise. So again, if you have that capacity or that dedication to your home garden and you want to keep them covered, you could plant a little earlier if you wanted.
There you go. All right. So how do I improve my soil quality?
Ooh, yeah. Soil is the keystone of the whole ball game, right? You want to have your soil to have good nutrients so the plants that grow in that soil get the good nutrients, so then you eat those good nutrients. So it sort of depends on if you're growing in the ground or you're growing in a raised bed and you're buying in soil. But sort of you could get a soil test so you really know what's going on in there. Where's your organic matter? You want to have more organic matter. But I think if you're a beginner, just buy in some high quality organic compost is a good idea. Where the compost will break down and add organic matter into your soil. Another thing that's really important is to keep it covered. So over the winter, especially if you can grow at the end of the season, if you have the wherewithal, to plant like what we call a cover crop. So you can buy oats. You can buy a mixture of oats and field peas.
Does that go for raised beds and non-raised bed gardens?
Yeah, anything where you're like, at the end of the season, you're done and you're tearing out those plants. You can just look up cover crop dates in your region. So I think the date for oats and peas is a little earlier, sort of like mid-September.
Okay.
Is sort of like your last, because you want to plant the seeds early enough that they grow large enough that when the frost comes, they die and they create like a mat, a living mulch mat to protect the soil. And that prevents erosion, nutrient leaching, and it prevents wind from blowing around and really drying it out. And if you can get your hands on some winter rye, that has a little bit of a later last seeding date. You can like throw that in until like mid-October. And that is something, unlike the oats and peas that will die in like cover a mat, the winter rye keeps living until the spring. So then you would have to figure out a way to like
get rid of
pull it out or mix it in or terminate it and then mix it in, because you want to add that greenery to, again, that'll boost your organic matter if you incorporate that living material back into the soil.
Do you have a preference between the two, or do you use all of them?
There are a lot of cover crops out there, hairy vetch and sun hemp and like just a lot of different things, and they all have a lot of different benefits. We try to keep it simple at the farm. Okay. I try to do like a mix of the two. One factor is because one of them dies with winter and because one of them just goes dormant and keeps living and starts to regrow in the spring. You kind of have to think about how early you need to be working that ground. So something that has something living is going to take longer to prep.
Mm-hmm.
And something that has something that's already dead is a lot easier. You can get into it right away. So then you have to figure out, I don't know. It's a lot of factors.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense though. Didn't realize like you could really get into like the nitty gritty of cover crops and realize there were so many.
Oh, cover crop is it's a very complicated beast, but it's super important. Yeah, I mean, we start simple right now, but I would love to sort of get into, as we incorporate more land, I would love to, diversify what we use and how we use it, especially, it's important for your land to rest too. We have that home block, if anyone's been to the farm, like that first block, right adjacent to the herb garden, that's been growing vegetables for the longest. It's like the original part of the veg garden.
Yep.
So last season we tried to rest a lot of those beds, and you just keep a log. Like this didn't get cover crop in 2023, so we need to make sure it gets like rest and cover crop in 2024. So, if you have a small plot at home, maybe resting isn't really feasible, but it would be, probably very helpful to make sure it's covered. And if you can't get something green in, you can put leaves over it, or even a tarp, so something that's not an organic material, just to like keep it tucked in, keep it happy, keep it cozy.
All right, well, this is so super helpful because I did a raised bed garden one year and I had probably like 4 or 5 raised beds, and was excited to do it the following year, and I didn't do any cover crop. And I did notice like my soil quality was not what it was that first year. Yeah,
especially if you're like spending a lot of money to buy in that soil. You don't want to have to pay that price every
single
year.
time. Yeah, exactly.
And they do, I will say too, like those raised beds tend to dry out faster. So sometimes
fast.
It's like, requires more watering. So if you can grow in the ground, but it's hard in an urban area because you never know like what was there. You want to be able to eat the food that you grow. You don't want to be afraid of it. So raised beds are a great option.
Oh, that's so helpful. It's such a good tip. So this might be my first year where I try to do some cover cropping and see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, you can just buy like oats.
I like the mulch idea too. Yeah. It's like I've seen people do that, but I never thought that whatever.
Yeah, hay, we use straw mulch on the farm. You use wood chips, but, wood chips you don't want to stick with leaves or hay.
Stick with leaves or hay? Okay. All right, so for the 5th question, that seems to be asked pretty frequently, what is the difference between heirloom and hybrid seeds?
So heirlooms, you brought up earlier that heirlooms are kind of like a purebred dog. I thought that was such a great analogy where, they are kind of have more of a pure lineage. And they are usually an older and more historical.
Kind of trace them back a little.
Yeah. They haven't been as domesticated and bred for a certain purpose besides taste usually, than a hybrid seed. So a hybrid seed has been domesticated and bred by people, human beings, to be just more resilient. So have more disease resistance or grow faster or grow bigger fruit. And heirlooms are sort of more on the taste wise. But that means, heirlooms are sort of more susceptible to like disease, and they do better undercover or in a structure. They just require a little more maintenance.
Okay. So I've never paid attention to heirloom versus hybrid, but this question, since it's asked frequently, is probably going to make me look at those packets now. Is one more expensive than the other typically? Or does it just depend on the seed?
Sure.
Okay.
Heirlooms might be a little pricier.
Yeah.
People like them because they're fun and they're different. And I'm just thinking of tomatoes, where you can get like those big, like striped ones and they're all different colors. And like just people, I think, really take to that sort of like fun variety. Like it's not just a round red tomato. It's like got this cool stuff. And a lot of people think they taste a lot better.
Okay. Very cool. All right. Well, I just learned a lot. I've gone off and on home gardening and mainly confidence is the issue there. So I can see why these questions are the top 5 most asked or top part of the frequently asked questions. Thank you so much for taking the time to break these down for us. I realize that you operate at a much larger level with the farm producing for
I don't have a home garden, but I will say don't be afraid to fail. I think farming is all about like adapting. And, if like one thing doesn't work because of the weather, like you just keep trying. And it's super fun and it's really gratifying. And especially when something goes well, it's like very exciting. And yeah, I think that there is no such thing as someone with like, people say, well, I don't have a green thumb or I have a black thumb. And there's no such thing, I think. It's just that take the time to observe, stare at that plant. Oh, it looks different. Oh, is this right? Oh, is something going on? It's just observation. So I think you can do it.
You can do it. You can do it. Some of my best gardening lessons have been made out of me completely messing something up or not doing it the right way. Because then I'll go on like a tirade of like trying to figure out like what went wrong. And I end up learning so much more on the backside. It's nice to not have to make those mistakes, but when you do, there is a major learning curve that happens.
Always something new to learn, definitely.
CJ, thank you so much for letting me come over here and pick your brain with home gardening questions. Appreciate it. Hopefully some of these answers help you guys at home who listen to the podcast. And always feel free to reach out. We're going to have show notes, ways for you to connect with the farm. And if you have any other questions, we'd love to talk about other things next season maybe.
Thank you so much.
All right. Bye, guys.